Hey, what's up, Life Without Pants with another Path of Exile video, and in today's video we're going to talk about a 320 potential league starter for you. This is the deck stacking Siege Ballista Hierophant. This is what the gear looks like right now. This is Legacy, but there's a new version of this in the game. I'm just using my standard kit from my previous leagues. We'll go over some of the changes to this build in between 319 and 320, and indeed 318 and 320 as well. There's been a few things, but largely everything's still intact. Let's just go and take a look at what the gameplay looks like. So we're just going to duck into this Forge of the Phoenix map, and largely you just throw down totems, and then they shoot everything like this, and that's it. That's all you have to do. You can put dash on this as well, which is pretty good because it's a dex-based skill. So there's lots of stuff that's very, very synergistic with this build. And I believe I actually have my bossing set up on as well right now. Let's take a look. Hypothermia. Oh no, this is actually the mapping version. So you can do mapping like this. There's also a gem swap if you want for bossing to make it very much more highly tuned for bossing. You don't need to do that. I think I did. This is the first build I ever killed the Feared on, so it was. It's got a special place in my heart, and also it's the first build I killed the Feared with everything tuned up to maximum. I think it was like a 8 mod version of the Feared. So I'm just gonna skip forward in time a little bit, and we're gonna go and kill the Phoenix. Alright, so here we are at the Phoenix, and I'm not going to use the, I think I have I do have a barrage support. I was level 10, so it's not exactly the greatest gem swap, but I'm just going to not bother using a gem swap at all. I'm just going to run in here, and all you do is put all your turrets down, and I think we also have a frenzy set up here on the click, and there we go. That's it. That's the end of the boss. That's how powerful this build can be towards the end of the game. I've got right now and there's Maven Witnessed as well. I didn't even notice her sitting over there. So yeah, this is, let's just spawn this metamorph so I can show you a bit more. And we'll just go with money. I do love money. We'll go with all the biggest things that is possible to get. And we'll just stand over here and pop Blood Rage. And there you go. That's all it takes. It's a very, very strong build. It can absolutely be league started as well, so it's really, really good to get off the ground early. And there's a pretty clear progression from early game through the campaign to white maps to yellow maps to red maps, and then to very, very high investment. Obviously, this is a very strong build when it comes to bossing. That was, as I said, that was without the bossing setup. I do have very high-end gear on this build, but let's go and have a look at the PoB, and you can make up your own mind. So let's take a look. Start off on Twilight Strand and run into town, kill Hillock, and grab yourself a Holy Flame Totem. It's a really, really good starter. And we're just going to progress straight up the damage miner into the LE damage nodes. We're going to take this Retribution. We're going to go for Light of Divinity and Holy Dominion, Discipline and Training, and down here with Precision as well, just to get some extra dex. And obviously that cast speed doesn't hurt. And then once we're into Act 2, Act 3 kind of territory, we're going to drop Holy Flame Totem, and we're going to go straight into Brands. We're going to go with Armor Brand Cremation. And there's this fire wheel here. There's this, because if you're doing Templar and you're in Act 3, you can get Leap Slam. I think you can get a bit earlier as well. And then the Dark Arts is block spell damage while you're dual wielding, and drop increase attack speed and cast speed while dual wielding. So that's super powerful early on to get some block for having dual scepters, which I think is the best way forward. Get your fire craft on your scepters as well. So that is at I think it's level 22 or 24, maybe it's 20. You can get a rare ruby ring, and you can make it rare. I wouldn't use alchemies to make it rare. I just kill any essence, buy a ruby ring from the vendor. If you can't find a ruby ring from the vendor, buy an iron ring, just a plain iron ring, and then vendor it with a red skill gem, and you will get a ruby ring. And then make that into a rare ruby ring. You could do this with earlier on, I think level 8 with a white item, and you can do it I think at level 16, 18, something like that with a magic one. But it's going to get some flat damage, so you're going to vendor that with your scepter, which should be a magic scepter, a rare ruby ring, and a orb of alteration, and then you're going to vendor that, and it will give you a scepter with some flat fire damage on, which is incredibly powerful early on. The early ones are very good for, I believe, if you're going to kill Brutus. I found that just having one of those, one scepter with flat damage on, makes the fight incredible, like much easier. Like we're talking half the amount of time to kill Brutus. It's really, really, good quality of life. So we're going to take the rune smith wheel over here and 2 additional brands. We're going to go for the rune binder. We're going to take explosive impact, dark arts, as I said before, and elemental overload. And this is going to be more than enough to go straight into normal lab. And for normal lab, we're going to come over here to conviction of power. It's going to give us power charges, and it's going to give us endurance charges as well. And 4 minimum endurance charges, that's a lot of, it's phys damage reduction, and it's a lot of resistances as well. Super useful early on, especially for gearing. It's a really, really good build for that. I'm strongly considering actually league starting with this instead of the explosive arrow. I'm not really sure yet, but and this is just a revision of one of the previous build guides. I'll put that down in the comments below so you can check it out. So now that we've got normal lab out of the way, we're going to come into cruel lab, and it's just an extension of what we've been doing here. We've got mental rapidity to get some extra cast speed and mana regenerate, because those brands, they fire on cast speed. We're taking Firewalker over here. Over here we're just grabbing a life wheel, that's pretty nice, and then taking a little bit of life down here. We're going to come straight down the strength nodes and into the Scion life wheel, get our life mastery there, because we've already got the plus 50 over here in this life mastery, and we're going to take up to Sentinel. Now once we're done here, we're going to go do our cruel lab, and we're going to get Pursuit of Faith, and this gives us +1 number of summoned totems, 100% increased totem duration, and totem placement speed. Now we don't have any totems yet. We still have Rune Binder, so we have -1 to number of summoned totems. So it's going to be for later on. We're going to keep going and into Merciless Lab, and this is where the build gets a little bit tricky perhaps, because you want to swap once you've got this one, which is Ritual of Awakening, so 5% more damage per summoned totem. Regenerate 0.5% of mana per second for each summoned totem. So this, you're going to be still, like, these don't actually make much difference because they're all totem related. I mean, there's a little bit of mana regenerate, but that's about it. And we're still not going to be using the totems yet. This fluid motion, this is no longer in the core drop pool. So this is a corruption only outcome in 320. So that means that you will only be, every viridian jewel you drop, you're going to want to Val Orbit, and hopefully it'll turn into a fluid motion. Flat dex for this build is very, very big. And then over here, we've just taken a little bit of fire and lightning resistance as a basic jewel socket there to get some extra dex maybe. We're taking Mage Bane, so we get a lot of dexterity to give us increased spell suppression per 15 dexterity. That's really, really good. That means with 1500 dex, you can cap out spell suppression, and that's super nice. Then we're just going to go, we've got another jewel here, Rain of Splinters. This is another removal from the core drop pool, so this now is also only corruption implicit. Oh, not corruption implicit, but corruption only outcome. So this means you're going to want to corrupt any crimson jewels you get as well along the way, and that's the only way that will come up is if it's a corrupted crimson jewel. So all your viridian jewels or your crimson jewels, corrupt both of them so you can get fluid motion and Rain of Splinters. Now if you don't manage to find one, because Val Orbs are few and far between, especially at League launch, maybe consider going to do some Endless Heists. There's a lot of Val Orbs there, and just making some money and getting these unique items. I want to guess at how frequent they'll be. I need Rain of Splinters either for this build or Explosive Arrow, so I'm not really sure how that's going to turn out, but I don't know if lots of people know that it's, I don't know how many people read the patch notes. Lots of people comment on the videos I make, and it's clear that they haven't read the patch notes. So maybe nobody knows that Rain of Splinters is corruption outcome only. Maybe nobody knows that fluid motion is. If you're watching this, corrupt as many crimson and viridian jewels as you can, because that means that you will have the source of these items, and that means you can make a lot of money. But yeah, once we got all that, we're going to come over here to grab all these dex wheels because we're a dex stacking build, and it's also more spell suppression. And then we're going to come over here to these crit strike and critical strike masteries for later on. Now, once we've got the Merciless Lab, you need to get some gear at this point, and I would recommend having a tabby is obviously really, really good. You should build up all of this stuff with your armor brand and work towards it for a big swap, because the swap here, I believe, is around, so we're just removing all this stuff over here, and we're coming down this way, and we're taking a bunch of extra things. So we're getting this cold damage wheel here, so we get 10% of fizz damage, cold damage. We're getting all these increased cold damage, 40% physical damage converted to cold damage. That's quite important. We're getting the watchtowers and totem wheel on the right hand side because you want that crit multi is very, very good. We're getting this life wheel over here. I think it's herbalism. Yeah. And then we're getting the dex, so the utmost swiftness. So this is the dex stacking wheel over here. And then we're going to come down and take iron reflexes. So we get a bunch of armor. And we're going to come and take surveillance, panopticon, and ironwood. And because of the number of totems that we get, ironwood actually becomes quite useful because you get 150 armor per summon totem, and you can get up to 20 something ballistas with this, and that's an extra 3k armor, which is quite effective. And so we're also taking, we're removing everything up here, and it's a difficult swap. I'm not going to lie. You want to have at least 800 to 1,000 dex. And the items that you're going to need for this, I think I have a swap set of items here. So Iron Commander, this is mandatory. You have to have this because this is how you get your Siege Ballista totems you have extra Siege Ballista totems per 200 dexterity. Here is Demise is no longer, I got to change that. That's no longer the correct quiver. We'll come back to that later. But then the helmet, you could just get a bunch of dex on this, some extra life. Like it said, a tabby, gloves, just dex, life, whatever kind of resistance you need to pick up. Garakan's Flight are great. They can be a little expensive early on in the league. And Astromentis, same goes for that. Astromentis is basically the top tier amulet you would want to get. And you can get it pretty early on for around 30 chaos, I think. It depends. Also, there are div cards for that as well, so make sure to check those out. And then 2 stone rings, leather belts, just with a bunch of decks. And you want decks. There's the number of people who've asked me, "Oh, can you help me with this build?" And they send me their PoB, and they don't have decks on some of their gear pieces. I'm like, this is a deck stacking build, right? That's one of the most important things you can get. Also, Garakan's Flight, extra life per dexterity. So dex not only gives you a bunch of armor, a bunch of spell suppression, it also gives you life as well. So it's really, really useful. And then we got this is our Ritual Awakening as our second lab, and then in Uber Lab or into White Maps, we've basically gone for Divine Guidance. There's not much else on the tree that's very good, but Transfiguration of Mind, quite good. 10% damage taken from mana before life. We don't usually have much mana. There's not many mana issues with this build. And also, 30% increased mana is fine. So once you have started whistling your way through White Maps, honestly, when it starts to feel good, this build it really starts to feel good. You will not notice a huge amount of difference between sort of late whites and early reds. You're going to breeze through yellow maps and you won't even notice. And make sure you got a lot of decks, and then we can move on to the the other things we've taken here is we've taken King of the Hill. So this bow wheel is quite important for this build. Look, a lot of dex and life on a jewel. That's going to be pretty easy to get. You can get some ailment avoidance as well. If if you keep dying to shock, then just get a bit of extra shock avoidance. If you keep getting chilled, take some chill, take a chill pill. And then once we get into red maps here, we've just gone for, there's a bit extra crit strike chance for attacks and move speed and increase max life, spell suppression, finesse as well. A bunch of extra dexterity, accuracy, attack speed. And then we're going over here to Master Fletcher. We're taking increases and reductions to projectile speed, also apply to damage with bows. I think you get around 20% from that. And obviously we're going to take the lethality wheel as well with our 1% increase to projectile damage per 16 dexterity. So it's going to significantly buff the amount we get from that. And then we got some extra frenzy charge generation over here. We got some more, another jewel slot, which is really, really nice. And we got a medium cluster here. This is a totem cluster, and it's going to have sleepless sentries and, you know, one other thing. So Ancestral Echo is very nice. There's quite a few things you can get here, but get a 4 or 5 passive totem cluster, medium cluster, and I believe it's level 68 onwards it can roll Sleepless Sentries. So just, you know, ult spam until you get Sleepless Sentries, and then regal and hope to get one of these. If you don't, maybe you scour and keep going, or maybe you just take it. But Sleepless Sentries, you have Onslaught if you summoned a totem recently. We've always summoned totems recently, so you'll always have this up. So you'll always have Onslaught, which is absolutely great. You know, move speed, attack, cast speed is really, really fantastic. As for the very high investment, then, you know, you can get a cold damage wheel with Blanketed Snow, Cold to the Core, and Dorian is Lesson. This is a significant damage boost. I think it's Cold to the Core is like around 70% just because it's 1% increased cold damage per 25 dexterity. Dorian is Lesson, obviously big bunch of LE damage, and then Blanketed Snow is the Cold Pen, which is very, very good. Split personalities, I have a 2 here, and they haven't specifically mentioned that they're not going to drop, and they haven't specifically said that they will either. And I believe in the patch notes, they just said, let me see if I've got the patch notes here. Yeah. I think it was Timeless Jewel. So I was looking for Timeless Jewels notable because I've got a Brutal Restraint here, I think. Yeah, there's a Brutal Restraint here. And they said that many unique jewels are no longer going to drop. And Timeless, you know, Brutal Restraint, all of the Timeless jewels, they weren't mentioned. So I feel it's a little bit difficult because they didn't say that this wasn't going to drop, but they didn't say it was either. They didn't mention Split Personality either, and they also they didn't call it out and they didn't not call it out. But Rain of Splinters is definitely not going to drop anymore. It's going to be Corruption only. I feel like Brutal Restraint is probably going to drop. And again, they didn't say. They have, let's see, what's the name of the fantastic jewel we have over here? It's the Unnatural Instinct. So if I look for Instinct, so here they say this, and big in this, enable grandfather mode. The availability of existing unique jewels has been reviewed, and many can no longer be obtained. It doesn't say which ones. And then the following are able to be found as item drops. So we've got Inspired Learning, Intuitive Leap, Lioness 4, Might of the Meek, Pure Talent, Unending Hunger, and Unnatural Instinct. And then these ones can only be obtained as corruption outcomes. And then it doesn't say anything about the timeless ones. So I don't know if this, but then it does say, if we look for timeless, the Glorious Vanity Timeless Jewel Notable now grants this instead. So I think it's, you know, because they've changed something that has it on it, it's probably going to be dropping. It's, the patch notes are a little meh. But this is what the end game tree looks like. And obviously if you've got a Brutal Restraint, then it can be really, really good. I think this one's got, I've got some critical strike chance with some move speed, some avoid being stunned. And you can, obviously there's a search function, find Timeless Jewel here in Path of Building. Highly recommend you check it out. And you can just look for stuff with, I got some Flat Dex. Flat Dex is very good in this. Obviously, anything that gets you a bunch of decks, really, really useful. Because, again, a deck stacking build. Please, please, please remember, this is a deck stacking build. If you're going to ask me what you're going to need in this build, it's going to be decks. It's always going to be decks. So this is what the end game tree looks like. There's a lot of travel nodes, but they're through dexterity nodes, so it's pretty good. You may notice that here, I don't take this one. It's because it's strength, and we can take all these, and they're all dexterity, and that's basically a lot better. There's a few things, this isn't the super high-end game. This is not where you've invested a mirror into the build or anything like that. There's a Watcher's Eye, and for Watcher's Eye, obviously, flat hatred damage is great. Crit strike with hatred, great as well. This build, you're going to be running hatred as an aura because it's very, very good. I believe we've got some skitterbots in here as well. Let's just take a look. I think I've got mine in my gloves. Yeah, so I got skitterbots. Let me just get rid of this. I've got skitterbots here. I've got Bone Chill and Enlighten with hatred. So for your auras, hatred's really good. Skitterbots really, really good. Bone Chill you can add in later on if you get a really good Enlighten. You don't have to have a level 3, but you can just run skitterbots and hatred on their own. You get a bunch of mana for this already. When it comes to movement skills, I prefer dash for this build. Most other builds I don't use dash. In fact, this is the only one where I do use dash. For the main skill, we're using Siege Ballista. If you get the anomalous one, then do. If you can pick that up, that's very, very good. Hypothermia is really, really great for mapping. It's just got a lot of chill on the enemies. A lot of the less they're hitting you, the better. Added cold damage support is fantastic as part of our gem setup here. Awakened Cold Pen, also excellent. Inspiration support is really, really nice. And obviously elemental damage with attacks, because the Siege Ballista is an attack. Is an attack projectile and totem along with bow tags. When it comes to the bow, you have to have the Iron Commander. We're going to increase critical strikes, Frost Bomb, Sniper's Mark, Cast on Crit, greater multiple projectiles, and this all ties into the Frenzy gem. So you only really need Frenzy on this. It's just so you can generate some Frenzy charges. Frenzy charges give you a bunch extra attack speed, which means that my life is going down because I've got Blood Rage on movement skill, which is quite useful. But again, we just put all our totems up and look at that. Our health is regenerating quite nicely. So yeah, I would say the most important thing is Frenzy. This is the most important one. GMP, just to, because then you can just fire and probably hit something. Cast on Crit with Sniper's Mark is really, really good. Cast on Crit is for, I think, Frost Bomb, and then Sniper's Mark is a great way to make sure that people are taking extra damage, and then increase critical strike chance. So you're going to crit more, and then you're going to frost bomb them, and the frost bombing is just there to add a 15% cold exposure. For our you can also have a Mirage Archer support set up with Blood Rage, with Ensnaring Arrow. So you can, I think I got that on W, so that you can just hit people with the Ensnaring Arrow, and then they stop shooting at you because they stop coming to kill you because they're quite far away. So that just stops people in their tracks. It's very, very useful. And obviously Ahiri's Ire is, I think it's Ahiri's Demise now. I think they've changed this one. This is a different, this is a legacy version, I suppose. But for gear pieces, Garakan's Flight, absolute mandatory. Astromantis, mandatory. Fractal Thoughts, this is really, really good because it gets you a ton of increased elemental damage per 10 dexterity. So, I'm not sure how much dexterity we got here. 2,000, let's say. So if you're getting 1% increased elemental damage per 10 dexterity, that's 200% increased elemental damage. So this is really, really big. And then obviously crit multi, if your dex is higher than your intelligence, that's going to be always true. And then crit strike multi if 15% increased dexterity if strength is higher than intelligence. So you do want your strength to be higher than your intelligence. That's quite useful. If you can get it with Siege Ballista, has 15% increased attack speed on it. That's very, very good. That's a very high damage kind of enchant. And then for rings, I think these are percent increased. Yeah, percent increase. This is synthesis implicit percent increased dexterity rings. There's going to be a new beast crafting recipe for these, so you can re-roll the synthesis implicit on items, and I think that's going to make these a lot more accessible. These are currently a bit difficult to get. They generally only come from Heist, I think. So getting these and just spamming a bunch of essences on them, bunch of dex essences is the way to go. For gloves, I went with, even though there's some really, really good Eater and Exarch implicits, I've gone for 18% increased attack, projectile attack damage Hunter gloves, because these can roll % increased dexterity. And for this, I think we just use some fossils. So I believe it's fundamental, I think. Fundamental fossil, so to get attributes on it, and then it's sanctified. So numerical values are lucky, higher level modifiers are more common. I think it's around 1 in 37 for you to get T1 dexterity and T1 % increased dexterity. You could also just keep spamming with rage. No, it's deafening essences of sorrow. This will get you 51 to 58 dex. Oh, this is actually tier 2 dexterity, so I clearly was fine with stopping there. But that's going to get you a bunch of dexterity. For a belt, you want % increased dexterity, synthesis implicit as well, until you can get, and just pile on whatever other stuff you want on there, like whatever kind of stats you're missing. And that's basically it. Obviously, Iron Commander is the most important thing. I'll be back in just a second when I figure out what kind of different bow we're going to be, quiver we're going to be using. It's the Poised Prism. So this is relatively close to what we had before. So this is going to pick up a bit of your resistances for you now. It's got the increased elemental damage with attack skills, which is not as good as having all attributes with dexterity and increased attack speed. But this is going to give you the cold damage per, so 1 to 2 cold damage per 10 dexterity, and the previous one, Hero's Demise also gave us exactly the same thing. So this is going to do a bunch of extra cold damage, but also pick up some of your resistances as well, because it's essentially 15 to 25 all res, and this build can be very tight on resistances. So it's actually a little bit of a boon. It's going to make the gearing a little bit easier, I think. These Poised Prisms, from what I saw previously in the league, I'm pretty sure they were like 1 chaos. Let's just have a look. Oops, no, poison. They were about 1 chaos, I believe, for most of the league. Oh, sometimes they were 2 chaos, so watch out for that spike in prices. But yeah, this is very cheap early league. This is 1 or 2 chaos early league. The Iron Commander is 1 or 2 chaos early league. Garakan's Flight is expensive, and so is Astromentis. And these, you can actually move on with this build without these, because everything can just be cold damage. Everything can just be dex, life, and whatever else you need. So that's it for this build. I hope you enjoy this. I'm going to link to the slightly more full build guide I made for this back in the end of 3.18, beginning of 3.19. The only real notes that have changed with this, I would say, is that the quiver is now the Poised Prism, and that we got a free reset. That the Fluid Motion and the Rain of Splinters are now only corruption specific outcomes. Split Personality remains to be seen. Brawn used to be a really good early game % increased dex jewel for this build. It's not dropping anymore, so that's gone. So that's, there are a few nerfs to this build, but and Brawn is gone, but it's still a really, really good build, very strong, especially in the getting through to bossing and doing all of the mapping, the late mapping section. It's a really, really good way to build up a lot of currency early on, and because you're freezing everything, you're doing a lot of cold damage. I think if we could just mouse over this, you're doing 15 to 27k cold damage. You're freezing stuff almost constantly. Basically, stuff doesn't come and hit you. Our chance to hit is 100%, and I think where's our crit strike chance? It's 61%, and I think we got a 70% with flasks up. A good amount of armor here, got 11k, and that's with no totems up. So if we put that up, we get to 15k totems with our flasks up.
and 100% spell suppression. Really, really nice. You could, if you wanted to swap out, you wanted to make it more. You die sometimes. It depends on how well you play, and if you wanted to die a little bit less, you could probably swap out one of the auras, probably swap out hatred and put in purity of elements or something. It would mean a lot easier gearing. Obviously the chaos resistance a little bit low on this one, so it depends how tanky you want to build stuff. But that's it from me. If you like this kind of build, if you like this, then stop by the Twitch channel. We're twitch.tv/lifewithoutpants. Come and check out the YouTube videos and check out what we're up to. And with that, I hope you're kind to everyone you meet. I love you all very much, and I'll see you next time.